All right, I think it's okay now.
Did you say you did an appraisal of the value of the Sony ATV catalog?
No, I considered values. I did not do a formal appraisal, as I mentioned earlier.
Do you have a piece of paper which reflects your values?
I have it in my mind, yes.
You didn't reduce it to paper?
I have papers in front of me here that show me how I get to that. But there's nothing that's formalized as far as a valuation report, no.
So pretty much it was done in your head?
No, I mean, it was done with calculators and with computers and the like, but I understand the value, and about the amounts I stated at those times.
Did the computer generate any type of report showing your analysis?
No, it's basically I have it in my notes in front of me.
Can I take a look at it?
Certainly.
May I approach, Your Honor? Now, I realize you said you're not an expert in the music industry, right?
That is true.
And you indicated you didn't know who the recording artists were whose music were copyrighted and owned by the catalogs, correct?
No, I've seen that. I just don't recall as I sit here right now. The appraisal that was done in 1999 lists all of the copyrighted material in that document.
How many recording artists are we talking about? Do you know?
In the Sony ATV?
Yes.
I don't recall. There was a number, as I recall.
There were hundreds, correct?
Yeah, there was a substantial amount, yes.
You had country western musicians, correct?
That's correct.
You had very different kinds of musicians in that arrangement, correct?
There was a wide disparity of types of music, yes.
And how many years out did you project the value of the catalog?
Well, I looked at when Mr. Jackson's interest would actually begin to see the benefit of some cash flow. And it's well out into 2015, I believe.
Well, if you don't know who any of the recording artists are and you can't put a value on their music today or tomorrow, how can you possibly give a value to the catalog?
Because I used the financial statements that were prepared by PricewaterhouseCoopers.
When?
They were prepared, I think, in 2003.
Well, what is the music going to be worth in 2006 or 2007 when you look at it artist by artist? You don't know, right?
Objection. Argumentative and irrelevant.
Well,
Overruled. You may answer.
no, certainly you do. I mean, that's exactly how you do valuation, is you look at what the catalog is producing in cash flow streams, and then you value that. And that's going to change over time. But you have to use historical paths to then try and figure out what the future will be.
Did they pick up any artists last year?
I suspect they did. There's constant investments.
Do you know who they were?
No, I don't.
Do you know what their music is worth?
No, I'm simply looking at the cash flow stream that this partnership is producing and projecting that out into the future.
If.
That's the only way anyone can do a valuation. No one is going to value the cash flow stream based on artists that aren't even in the catalog yet.
But if you have artists who are in the catalog and you have someone who's an expert on how their music is marketed and how it might be marketed differently this year or next year, you can place additional value, correct?
Additional over what? I'm simply using the real numbers as to what the cash flow was, and that cash flow would generate a value. And that's how you value that asset.
Has the cash flow changed from year to year?
Yes.
Where is it going to be 3 years from now? Do you really know?
That's the projection you have to make.
Okay.
To come up to a value. And that's exactly how it was valued, pardon me.
Sure.
That's exactly how it was valued by the valuation people in 1999, was simply to look at an income stream, try and understand what that income stream was going forward, and then put a multiplier on it. That's how any valuation works.
So in other words, if you're going to try and put a value on this music catalog and project out 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, you don't need to know who the recording artists are, what kind of music they've generated, and where that music is likely to be or not be in a few years, right?
No, that has to be considered. But again, historical paths to the cash flow is what's most important.
So now you're conceding it is important to know who the recording artists are and what value you might be able to place on their music 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, right?
Objection. Argumentative.
Overruled. You may answer.
As of 2003, we know what the cash flow was. And at that point in time, you can value based on the cash flow. In fact, If there are other artists added in 2004 and 2005, that could change the cash flow, and that should be considered, absolutely. But in 2003, when you have the figures, that cash flow is known and can be used to then value into the future.
Okay, looking at the document that we talked about earlier, which is a letter from International Business Management dated February 13, 2003, to attorney David Legrand, okay?
Yes, I remember that memo.
That's the letter that, on page 2, says the value of the Sony ATV catalog is estimated to be approximately $1 billion, right?
That's correct.
Okay, according to that letter, which you certainly did consider in your work, right?
That is correct.
It says that in November of 2005, the bank will enforce a put, right?
Correct.
Which forces Sony to either buy out Mr. Jackson's interest at fair market value, right?
Correct.
Sell the entire catalog to a third party, right?
Correct.
Or give Mr. Jackson the opportunity to purchase Sony's interest in the catalog, right?
Correct.
And do you have any way of knowing what Sony's interest in the catalog will be in November of 2005?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't have that. I haven't calculated what Sony's interest is.
How would you do it, if you were going to?
The same way as you do with Mr. Jackson's interest, you simply look at the cash flows that would be accruing to or earned by Sony, project that out over time, and then discount it back.
How do you relate the $1 billion amount to the value either side has in the catalog?
Well, the $1 billion is the entire catalog.
Right.
It's made up of two components, the Sony component and Mr. Jackson's component. And the two would equal whatever the value is.
Okay, so if the value is estimated at $1 billion, each side would theoretically have a $500 million interest, true?
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
If the catalog is worth $1 billion, that's what the catalog's worth. Then you have to go about the process of understanding what the cash flows which will accrue to each party will be, and that's how you value the total $1 billion.
And you have no way of knowing what third parties are out there trying to purchase it, correct?
I do not, no.
Okay, no further questions.
I have no further questions, but I do have a request at sidebar.
All right, we should mark the PowerPoint.
And I have a copy of that, which I'll mark.
And you may approach. Discussion held off the record at sidebar.
All right, Mr. O'Brien, I'm just going to finish up with one final question. Based upon your cash flow analysis and everything you know about this case, what is the maximum, in general? What is the value of what Mr. Jackson could obtain for this ATV, Sony catalog in February of 2003?
Objection. No foundation, no expertise.
I phrased it in terms of a cash flow analysis, which he's testified extensively about.
What I'm going to do is limit the question to a little different question, which would be what was the value he used in determining the net worth figure that he's already testified to the jury.
Maybe I'll lay a couple of foundational questions before I ask that one. Just a couple. Mr. O'Brien, are you familiar with how these catalogs are appraised, in general terms?
Yes, I am.
And when an appraiser conducts an appraisal of a music catalog, do they use a cash flow analysis?
Yes, they do.
And are cash flow analyses something that you do in the course of your business as a forensic accountant or a CPA?
All the time.
And did you do such an analysis in this particular case?
We did, yes.
And based upon that, can you tell us what your conclusion was based on a cash flow analysis of the value of Mr. Jackson's share of the ATV catalog in February of 2003?
As I stated, I believe that's $200 million.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mesereau?
When you say Mr. Jackson had a $200 million interest in the catalog in February of 2003, are you suggesting that if he sold it for $200 million, he would end up with zero because of his debt?
Yes, and/or taxes.
And where did the other $700 million in value of the catalog go to? Sony?
Go to Sony, yes.
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
Even though they each had a 50% interest.
Just a moment. The objection is overruled.
Even though they each had a 50% interest in something estimated at $1 billion, you think Sony's interest is really worth $700 million, correct?
Yes, at least that.
And tell me how you arrived at that conclusion.
Again, it's just simply looking at the cash flows that would be accruing to Mr. Jackson over time, beginning in 2003, out over a period of time. And because of the fact that he has taken much more than Sony, Sony is due an equal amount. Sony is additionally due the investments that they have made, plus interest. The cash flows that would accrue to Mr. Jackson and/or his interest would not even occur until about 2015. At that point in time, the discount rate used would, quite frankly, have a value of around $200 million.
Do you know Mr. Jackson was offered $400 million for half of his interest in 2003?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence.
I guess the question is, are you aware of any such offer?
No, I'm not.
Are you aware of what anyone has ever offered Mr. Jackson for his interest in the catalog?
No, I'm not.
Have you ever tried to market a music catalog in your career?
I have not, no.
Ever tried to negotiate a sale of any interest in a music catalog?
I have not, no.
Is this the first music catalog you've analyzed with your cash flow analysis?
No, I also did one for Mr. Bowie, David Bowie.
No further questions.
If Mr. Jackson wanted to sell his share of the ATV catalog to somebody else in 2003, could he have done it?
Only with the approval of Sony.
And as far as this put goes, did you consider that in your cash flow analysis, the fact that in December of 2005 he would receive $200 million?
Certainly. I mean, that's a stated amount that he could get in 2005.
So if he sold it in 2003, he would accrue. What was your tax analysis in terms of how much capital gains tax he would have to pay?
25%.
So $40 million?
Off.
Off the $200 million?
That's correct.
Okay. Finally, there was.
It was $50 million. Well, no, that's not true because you have to take the basis out.
So you tell me.
So it was about $40 million, as I recall.
And Mr. Mesereau said if Mr. Jackson got $200 million, then Sony would be entitled to $700 million. I believe we've got a math problem there.
Well, the 800. That's why I said.
It would be 800. All right, thank you. Nothing further. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. For the record, what's the exhibit number on the PowerPoint?
That would be 886, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Call your next witness.
Call Rudy Provencio to the stand, please.
Right here?
Yes, please. When you get there, remain standing. Look at the clerk over here. Raise your right hand. Right here.
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
My name is Rudy R. Provencio. Rudy R. Provencio.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Provencio, what is, good afternoon.
Hello.
What is your current occupation?
Independent contractor.
What kind of an independent contractor are you?
For entertainment, placement of music for film and television.
What does that mean?
Basically, it means that I take music that already exists, and I place it in film and television, depending on what they are looking for or what they want. You know, like for a commercial, they would want something, maybe an oldies.
Excuse me.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
If you could just scoot closer to the mic.
Scoot closer? For TV or film, basically what are they looking for? If they're looking for an oldies, like if, for instance, if the Gap is looking for an old song, I would secure rights for that song and bring it in, and secure the legal part of it, and the whole 9 yards, so.
Do you work for a company or are you self-employed?
Self-employed.
How long have you been in this business?
The entertainment business?
Yes.
20 years.
Prior to that, what type of work did you do?
I worked for record companies, various record companies.
Do you know Mark Schaffel?
Yes, I do.
Did you know him by the name Fred Schaffel?
Yes, Fred Schaffel.
When did you first meet Mr. Schaffel?
I met him in high school in 1983, 84.
You both went to high school, the same school?
Yes, Toledo, Ohio.
In Toledo, Ohio?
Uh-huh.
At some point in time, did you actually do business with Mr. Schaffel?
Not until much later, which would have been 2001.
And in 2001, did he contact you or did you contact him?
He contacted me.
Now, how did he know who you were at that point or where you were or what you did?
He came over to the record labels a couple of times to pick up CDs and such, and I kept in contact with him. When he moved out to California, I met up with him, I believe in 93. Yes, it would have been 93, because I was working at Warner Brothers Records at that time, so I met up with him and, we kept a casual contact.
Were you both living in the Los Angeles area during that time?
Yes.
Alright, did he invite you into some form of business adventure?
Yes, with him and Michael Jackson.
Alright, what was it exactly that you were invited to go into?
I was invited to come and participate in a benefit single called, What More Can I Give? And he said that it was a Michael Jackson and Mark project, and they were both going to hire me to work on this project if I was willing to come on board with them.
Alright, did you eventually talk with Mr. Jackson about your involvement in that?
We had a meeting we first had a meeting with, the first one we had at the Beverly Hills Hotel with Lee Davidian, I think is his last name, where it was Ali, myself, Mark, and we talked about doing, What More Can I Give? Into a game that Ali was producing.
Uh-huh.
Or such. So, there was a lot of material to cover in that meeting. I remember that, because there was going to be a game featuring Michael Jackson in the game.
Alright.
And the music of, What More Can I Give? Was going to be in that, so we talked about that.
Explain. What more can I give? You mentioned was a benefit single.
Charity single.
What does that mean?
Basically we hadn't announced what Michael's charities were going to be yet, because Michael would have to do that. He is the captain of the helm, so he'd have to do that. But basically what the idea and the premise was to do a benefit single that would benefit people just in general and Michael's charities in particular. We hadn't narrowed it down exactly what those charities were going to be until, a little bit more into the project. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but we'll have a couple more, as you can imagine.
Alright.
How does a single benefit anybody in the day and age where you only buy CDs with many songs on them? What?
Objection. Move to strike. Colloquy.
Coming from you? Laughter.
My sentiments exactly.
All right. Stricken.
Stricken. All right. How does a single benefit anybody? How do you market a single?
Well, we were looking at it to be the next, We Are the World. Michael was a genius behind that. That made more money than any other single in history.
Tell us what We Are the World was.
Oh, I believe in 1983 or 84 it came out and basically it made $1 trillion. I don't know how much exactly. I won't say, $100 million, because I don't know. But we were estimating that even if, What More Can I Give? Could make half of that, that would make like $50 million right there and would be able to go to some of Michael's charities, in the process.
Okay, how is it marketed? A single. How do you market a single?
Well, it depends. Basically, we'd have, the way that I was thinking that we were going to do it, the way that we had talked about it is, we would do a press release later in regards to who was going to be the beneficiaries. But Michael would have to have done that because that's going to be Michael's charities. But it would have gone through the regular routes, which would have been a record company for the distribution. We didn't really want Sony at the time. There was some problems with Sony. So we were going to look, per advice, Mark and Michael, to go other places and look at other distribution. Like I believe we ended up talking with Zomba Entertainment, and they handled Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys and stuff, and so they were hot, so we were thinking we were going to possibly go with their distribution.
Now, would this be a song that would have been performed by multiple groups?
By multiple who?
Groups. Performers.
Multiple performers, yes.
Performers.
We had a recording time in the studio and we brought in quite a few artists.
Is that, in fact, what We Are the World was?
No, that was an arrangement that was different. They came from an awards show and went right across the street, essentially, or down the street, and they recorded it in one fell swoop.
And who are they? You say, they came and did that.
Oh, well, the performers that were on We Are the World, Kim Carnes, Huey Lewis and the News, Michael was there, Diana Ross, everybody went from an award show looking good and went into this thing with recording, filming, the whole 9 yards. Ours was a little bit different, because what we were going to do is bring people in one at a time and record it, so it was a little bit more, it was essentially the same premise, but a little bit more lengthy.
Alright, were you anticipating having multiple groups or performers?
Yes, we did.
And were you going to be generating an entire CD or a single song?
We were going to have a Spanish version that was completed with Casey Porter doing the Spanish version, which was completed, and then we were going to have the English version and many different artists. Santana played on the Spanish version. And so we were going to have many artists on, essentially the same amount of artists, but a little bit different with the Spanish version than the other one.
Again, this is a single song?
Yes, a single song with many versions. So that would be considered what's called a CD5. So that would be different versions of the same song.
By different versions, how would it be marketed? I mean, in a physical form.
Well, the marketing, it's its own unit when you look at it, because it's a Michael Jackson song. It's, which you can't get bigger than that. And, you've got a benefit. You would have a world press release around it. It would create its own buzz. You wouldn't even have to take out an ad anywhere, so then you'd have to have the discs from the record label to kind of get it in the public's hands, which would have been Best Buy and the other chains.
So you actually purchase it as a CD?
You would purchase it as a CD.
On the CD as one single song?
A single song with many versions, yes. English and Spanish as well. And remixes. There were going to be remixes by Junior Vasquez.
That does sell?
Oh, absolutely. For something like, if you can tie into something that is of importance, like charities and things like that, then you have a commodity that's very well sought after.
Tell me when it was that you were called into this. When were you invited to explore the possibilities of joining this enterprise?
2001.
Do you remember when in 2001?
June is the first meeting.
Okay. The first meeting between you and who?
Mark and Michael. And Ali joined us on that first meeting.
Alright. And that first meeting was in a hotel in Los Angeles, is that right?
Yes.
Now, was the song already drafted? Was it already performed? Was it already recorded?
Yes, Michael had done a demo of it.
Okay. Were artists lined up to participate in the recordings?
Yes, absolutely.
Had some of the artists already participated in the recordings?
Not at that time. Not June.
Okay.
Michael had a demo, and the only thing that was on it was Michael's voice.
Alright. Is it possible, in fact, to be able to have multiple artists performing at different locations at different times?
Absolutely. That's what we did.
One of the things you have to do is wait until the whole question is asked.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She goes nuts otherwise.
Oh, I'm really sorry.
Is it possible to be able to, in fact, perform at different places and different times and then be able to mix it all into one product?
You can perform many places at the same time, and so that's, yes. And then you can mix it as one product later, yes, absolutely.
So it was not necessary to be able to have everybody perform at the same time, same location as was done in We Are the World.
Correct.
That was a matter of convenience back then?
That was a matter of happenstance.
Okay.
I believe. You just happened to go across the street and there you are.
Okay.
Performing a song. I mean, they planned it. But they also planned it that all these performers could, from what I understand.
You described this as a benefit single, which means part of the purpose is to raise money for charities, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Was it also intended to be for profit?
Well, yeah, you have to make a profit to keep going. I mean, it's like, you can't be in the ditch for $20 million. Yeah, so it had to make a profit somewhere.
So not just pay expenses. This wasn't just a charitable enterprise exclusively, but it was going to generate profit for some people. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, were you hired on salary?
Yes. Salary,
Were you ultimately hired to do this?
Yes.
And did you actually work on this project?
Yes.
And by the time you From the point that you began the project to the time that you officially ended your employment on this project, how long had you worked on it?
Until 2001, June is when we took the first meeting. I'd have to look at my records to see exactly when they signed my contract, and then it was 2003 of February, the 25th, I believe I received my last check.
Alright, and when did you cease your employment? Was it on the day you received your last check?
No, I stopped going in the office, I believe it was the first week of August.
What kind of things were you expecting to do in terms of promoting and marketing and creating this product?
Well, nobody had any record experience.
Calls for speculation.
I believe he did it.
But you asked him what he was expected to do.
Alright, let me change the question, then. What actually did you do during the 2 years of employment in this capacity? What types of things did you do?
Okay, well, I was the general manager of the label of Neverland Valley Entertainment. I oversee the books. Not all of the books, but a certain major portion of the books. Everything from the task of filing, to making sure artists are where they're supposed to be, and doing the things that we're supposed to do to get things done to get the single finished, and to facilitate any other dream or necessity that Michael might have that would fall into us participating with him.
Alright.
On that.
You've mentioned Neverland Valley Entertainment. What exactly is Neverland Valley Entertainment?
It's Mark and Michael's company.
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained.
Alright, at some point in time, did you become part of Neverland Valley Entertainment?
Well, yeah, when they signed my contract.
And during the course of your 2 years of working as the general manager of Neverland Valley Entertainment and based on your conversations with both Mark and Mr. Jackson, did you learn what Neverland Valley Entertainment was?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence and foundation.
Overruled. You may answer.
What is it?
Can you state the question again? I'm sorry.
Perhaps the court reporter could read it.
And during the course of your 2 years of working as the general manager of Neverland Valley Entertainment and based on your conversations with both Mark and Mr. Jackson, did you learn what Neverland Valley Entertainment was?
Well, it was a Michael and Mark company. That's what it was.
Was it created while you were there?
Well, yeah, it was created as, it wasn't flying until we got a loan, but, yeah, we were in the midst of having conversations with Parviz to get a loan, to get a loan to get this thing flying.
Alright, who were the people who were involved at the time that you came into it, with Neverland Valley Entertainment?
Who were the people involved?
Yes.
It would have been Michael, Mark, myself. You know, Dieter and Ronald were on the fringes, but the single was Mark and Michael.
The what was Mark?
The single, the What More Can I Give, was Michael and Mark's creation.
Did you have meetings with Mr. Jackson pursuant to your coming on board?
Yeah, we had meetings at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and then we had meetings at the Universal Hilton.
What discussions did you have with Mr. Jackson about your involvement in this in either of those 2 meetings?
Objection. Vague.
Overruled. You may answer.
Okay, the first meeting, we talked about the video game, and then we talked about how, What More Can I Give, would be a great project, which we could work on, make some cash, and, and basically have it segue way into many other things. Maybe, because we had a conversation in regards that the What More, or the We Are the World, wasn't marketed to its full potential. There weren't like a lot of t-shirts made. There was different marketing.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
Sustained.
Did you have a discussion as to how, What More Can I Give, would be marketed during either of those 2 meetings?
Yes.
What was the nature of that discussion?
The nature was that basically we needed to reach its full potential, much more and much better, making it much bigger and making much more money than We Are the World made. How are we going to do that? Are we going to take a present situation and make it better? Basically this present model that we had was, We Are the World. How do we explore that?
And you said.
And you need a business plan.
And you said, and make more money. Was there a discussion with Mr.
It had to be bigger.
Hold on.
Sorry.
You've got to wait until the question's asked. Was there a discussion with Mr. Jackson as to the potential of what could be made on the production of What More Can I Give?
To answer your question, Michael wanted it bigger and better than We Are the World. So it had to be more than, We Are the World, which unfortunately I don't remember off the top of my head. I know it was like $100 million, something crazy like that.
Mr. Jackson had indicated he wanted this to exceed that?
Oh, yeah, he was very excited. It had to. It had to.
Was there any discussion as to what percentage of this would actually go toward the charitable causes and what would be profit?
We hadn't really finessed that all out. I mean, we really were. We were. Everything was moving very quickly, like everything in my experience with Michael. Everything moves very, very quickly, and Michael wants his results now. And we really hadn't gotten down to sitting with lawyers to work out percentages and things like that. We knew essentially, what we wanted to do overall, but we had to get a product made first, so that was our first and most important thing, was to get this product made.
Did you ever actually sit down with lawyers and work out details of percentages as to who would get what during the course of that 2 years you worked on that project?
No.
Did you have some form of contract signed with either Michael Jackson or Mark Schaffel as to what your compensation would be?
Yes. They gave me a point on the record.
Did you have a salary in addition to a point on the record?
Yes, I did.
What was the salary?
$225,000.
And was that for the duration of the project?
For the project.
Would it make a difference how long the project took?
Not really. The project had to be done, so.
Did you have a sense at the time as to did you anticipate what it would be?
A year, maybe a little bit more. But a year.
Now, you also said a point was given to you. What does that mean?
Well, a point is basically a percentage, or a 1% of the gross, or the total of a project. Mark got 4 points. Michael had given Mark 4 points. And Michael and Mark had given me 1 point.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Alright, let's talk about what was going to you, and then we'll talk about Mr. Schaffel.
Okay.
1 point was given to you, and you mentioned the gross. Explain what that means.
Well, what the album makes, is considered, what it really actually. What's in the kitty at the end of the day is really, what you're selling. I'm not making sense here, but when the product is sold, you've got your expenses covered first. That comes out of, like you make $1, and let's say you just made the $1 from that CD. Your 60 cents of it is taken away because it's, marketing, whatever. This was going to be a cheap single, so we weren't going to be spending a tremendous amount of money, so there would be more take home, for Neverland Valley Entertainment, so I think I just got lost.
Let me ask this, the 1% gross.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean your 1% would come to you before any of the expenses were paid?
Oh, no, we hadn't worked that all out yet. That hadn't been worked out. So if the record made $50 million, you have to remember, we hadn't sat down with the lawyers to get the exact verbiage down, so we were estimating. And our assumptions in our meetings was that if it made $50 million, I would be getting 1% of that.
Which would be $500,000.
Or if it made more.
Or if made 100 million, you'd get 1 million?
Exactly.
Alright, did you negotiate that? In other words, was that part of the negotiation as you came into this project?
No.
Objection. Relevance.
No.
Sustained.
When did you get the 1%?
Objection. Relevance.
Sustained.
Who is it who gave you the 1%?
Michael and Mark.
Objection. Relevance.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
Michael and Mark.
Was that in the form of a document signed by both of them?
Objection. Leading and relevance.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, they both signed it.
And did you commence work on this project?
Yes.
Alright, what were over the next, say, couple months after you began working in June of '01, did you speak with Mr. Jackson on any kind of regular basis?
Well, we had the studio time, and we'd have our meetings in the studio time, and, there was plenty of filming of that.
Did you have conversations with him as well?
Yes.
What was Mr. Schaffel's role in this? You were the general manager. What was he?
He was the president of Neverland Valley Entertainment.
And did he have a similar agreement to yours in terms of compensation?
Yes, he did.
Objection. No foundation.
Sustained.
As the general manager, did you have access to all of the records that dealt with the expenditures?
Well, they were in a filing cabinet, and I went through all of them, yes.
You read them all?
I read most of them.
As well, it was the two of you. Did you have conversations with Mr. Schaffel about such matters?
Oh, yeah, we talked about things. He was a little bit more braggadocious, but.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Sustained.
Braggadocious?
Yeah, he bragged a lot.
What was his compensation, Mr. Schaffel's?
Objection. Foundation. Relevance.
Sustained.
Did you review his employment documents as well?
I looked at them, yes.
Yeah. And did that contain what his compensation was?
Yes.
And what was it?
Objection. Relevance.
Sustained. It's hearsay, really.
During the next couple months, you indicated that you did have meetings with Mr. Jackson. Can you tell us with what level of frequency you would meet with him?
Well, whenever he came to the studio, but sometimes he wouldn't come to the studio. So it was whenever he came into the studio.
And how often might that be?
Boy, the first couple of months, it was pretty regular. I mean, he came in, 3 or 4 times a month.
Did you have meetings with him on a regular basis when he came into the studio?
Well, we would talk about the project. How did we think? When Michael walks in the door, he's meticulous. He wants to know everything that's going on and what's happening, and he's a great businessman.
Objection. Non-responsive and move to strike.
Sustained.
Did you brief Mr. Jackson on a regular basis of what was going on with Neverland Valley Entertainment?
We did, yes.
Objection. Foundation. Leading.
Overruled. You can go ahead and answer. He did. He said, yes.
How did you do that? How did you brief him?
We would have meetings. Michael would want to know what's going on. Who do we have coming in? Did you get this person? Is Usher coming?
Objection. Non-responsive. Move to strike.
I'll strike after. We would have meetings.
What kind of things would Mr. Jackson want to know in the course of these meetings?
That we are getting the hottest artists out there right now on this project. We had to be the hottest.
And did he ask you details in terms of who you were going after and what you were attempting to do?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled.
You can answer.
Oh, he wanted to know that it was the hottest artist, and when are they coming, and what are we doing?
Alright, in addition to the meetings at the studios that took place, did you also have meetings with him at other locations?
Well, like I said, we had the Beverly Hills Hotel. We had the studio meetings. And then we had 2 meetings at the Universal Hilton.
Alright, did you have telephone conversations with Mr. Jackson?
Oh, yeah, he called, him and Mark would call my house.
On what level or frequency? And we're talking about Mr. Jackson, not Mark Schaffel. But on what level of frequently would you have a conversation with Mr. Jackson about the business?
In the beginning, the first couple of months, I would say it was semi-regular, once or twice a month. Just late-night phone calls, because Michael gets up late, so it would be late-night phone calls sometimes.
You would be home by the evening hours?
Yeah, I'd be home.
Alright.
Exhausted, but home.
And did you ever get calls from Mr. Jackson while you were at the office?
Yes, he would call in.
And did you, in fact, have an office there?
Yes, at Neverland Valley Entertainment.
And where was Neverland Valley Entertainment?
In Calabasas, California.
At somebody's residence?
At Mark's residence, yes.
Describe for us his residence, please, in Calabasas.
A gated community. Pretty swanky. It's pretty nice. A rich person's home.
And was the office set at a particular location within the house?
Upstairs.
Alright. Were there multiple offices devoted to this project?
Well, there was an office at Neverland, but, that wasn't really used that much. It was usually worked out of the bungalow and then, but that was the primary office, Mr. Schaffel's.
At Mr. Schaffel's residence, were there multiple rooms that were devoted to this project?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have separate rooms from Mr. Schaffel?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Were you able to hear, from where you worked, conversations that Mr. Schaffel was having on the telephone?
Well, Mark had a really bad habit of having you sit there, and he would.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Overruled. You may finish that sentence.
Mark would have a really bad habit of having you sit there, and he would put people on speakerphone, or answer on speakerphone, so you would know who it was, so he can kind of gloat that, ooh, look who I'm talking to, whether it's Michael or Beyonce or some other star. And then he would pick up the phone or he would just leave them on speakerphone, and you could hear the whole conversation. Everybody in the house that we were working in, we were always shocked that pretty much a lot of business was known just by sitting there,
Alright, so did you have to actually be in his room to be able to overhear these conversations?
Well, yeah, pretty much you had to be in his office. But then I could hear them in my office, too, if I jumped on a conference call with them.
Did you frequently overhear conversations that Mark Schaffel was having with other people concerning his business enterprise?
Yes.
Did you frequently overhear conversations that Mark Schaffel was having with Michael Jackson?
Yes.
Objection. Foundation.
Sustained.
Do you know Michael Jackson's voice?
Yes.
Is it fairly distinct?
Well, unless he's upset. Then he uses the other voice.
Now, you tell us another voice.
Objection. Non-responsive.
Oh.
Sustained.
Have you talked with Mr. Jackson often enough or been present during his conversations that you're able to recognize his voice when he calls?
Michael Jackson's voice is the most distinctive voice in the world, I think.
Objection. Non-responsive. Move to strike.
Overruled. Next question.
Alright, that means yes, you do know his voice?
Yes.
And you know his voice well?
Based on my experience of hearing him.
On those occasions when he called, did you have any difficulty at all recognizing his voice?
No. God, no. He always introduced himself as Michael Jackson.
Alright, were you able to overhear conversations between Mark Schaffel and Michael Jackson?
Yes.
Both sides of the conversation? In other words.
At times. Not all the time, but at times.
Alright, can you give us a sense of how often you would overhear a conversation? And I'm now talking about both sides of the conversation between Mark Schaffel and Michael Jackson. How often would that happen?
Could you be more clear? I'm sorry.
Well, in the first couple months of your employment with Neverland Valley Entertainment. Give us a sense of how often you would overhear a conversation between Mark Schaffel and Michael Jackson.
Frequently. Especially if I stayed later, because Michael would always call later. And he would always call him Arnold. That was his nickname, Arnold. And then he would pick up the phone and say, "You're looking for French fries?"
Objection. Non-responsive. Move to strike.
Stricken.
Alright, we'll get to Arnold in just a moment.
Oh, alright.
Let's talk about, if we can, this happens when we get later in the day.
Okay.
The frequency with which you might hear conversations between Michael Jackson and Mark Schaffel where you could actually hear both sides of the conversations, you answered, frequently, to that.
Yeah.
Give us a sense, please, of what that means in a week period of time.
Well, if you're speaking about the beginning, before the Martin Bashir thing, Michael was calling. He wanted to know what was happening with the project. He's a meticulous businessman.
Objection. Non-responsive. Move to strike.
So the question is kind of hard to get back to. But you were asking him what the frequency of calls from Michael Jackson were.
Yes, Your Honor, I was.
That's the question. How often did he call in a week?
In a week? God, sometimes 10 times. Hey, he would be on the phone with him for hours sometimes at night. And we didn't have a schedule. You have to remember, work is work. You get up, you work. And when Michael calls and you got something to do, you work.
Objection. Non-responsive.
So it's like that's the way it was.
Give us a sense of when you were there at this office in Calabasas. What kinds of hours and days did you put in?
7 days a week. If you had to do something, you had to do it.
Now, you were working pretty much full-time on this project?
Yes. This was our only project in the beginning.
The point that was offered to you, that 1% of, at the time as was described as gross, did that give you some incentive to work even harder on making this?
Well, God, yeah.
Objection. Leading and relevance.
Sustained.
What is the consequence of having a commission like that?
You'd be rich.
Objection. Relevance.
Would you like me to move on, Judge?
Yes.
And I will. All right. During the course of the conversations that you had with Mr. Jackson, and of course the conversations you had overheard with Mr. Schaffel, as frequently as they were, describe how attentive to business Mr. Jackson was.
He wanted to know the details.
Objection. No foundation.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
He wanted to know the details. He wanted to know what was happening with the project. The project was, it was taking time to get the artists in, so he wanted to know we were getting the hottest artists and the best artists, and where were we going to be going next, and things like that. I mean, it was pretty much our duty to make sure everything was set up.
Objection. Non-responsive.
The last sentence is stricken.
Do you know who was financing this project?
Michael was.
Do you know how it was being financed?
Yes.
How?
Through a moneylender named Parviz in Beverly Hills.
Was that a loan that was obtained by Michael Jackson?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
Yes, it was a loan that Mark and Michael got from Parviz for $10 million.
Were you there?
I was there when the paperwork was signed. We brought the paperwork to Parviz after Michael had signed it in Beverly Hills, in the 9000 block of Beverly Hills, Wilshire, and Parviz ran it upstairs, and we came back the next day, and it was signed.
Okay. Now.
And I saw the document.
Was the $10 million actually turned over to either Mark Schaffel or Michael Jackson?
No, it was, like, in the bank, and they withdrew. I think it was like $2 million, $2.25 initially to start the company, start the project going.
All right. And which bank, incidentally, was that deposited into?
It was Mark's bank, and that would have been B of A. No, not B of A. It was, God, I can't remember the name of it. I can see the logo, but I can't remember the name of it. But.
Were you about to say?
But it was the one off of Santa Monica. I remember because we went there many times, because Beverly was the lead person that we dealt with.
All right. So you were there in Santa Monica, the city of Santa Monica?
Uh-huh.
Beverly was the person.
Yes.
You dealt with?
Her name was Beverly.
And you've seen her?
Oh, yeah, I've talked to her many times. She made me open an account. I didn't have $1 million to put in it, but.
Did you get a toaster?
I didn't get anything, but I opened an account with her.
You want to quit, don't you?
I really do.
All right. See you tomorrow at 8:30. Remember the admonitions.
Thank you.